As the offseason rolls on, Locked On Flames has you covered for all the news and notes surrounding your Calgary Flames this offseason.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jessica Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. Today, I thought we would take it slow, not much happening, kind of catch up around the team. They announced Sam Morton's extension. So we'll talk about him and his role with the organization, as well as Cullen Potter getting invited to Team USA's showcase, and some other news stories or maybe some transactions you should keep on your radar as we roll through the dog days of summer. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. And let's jump into this. So the Flames announced this afternoon that Sam Morton signed a 1-year, 2-way deal worth $775,000. He has played one NHL game. He has played 83 games with the Wranglers, totaling 25 goals and 52 points. So for me, looking at this is a good deal. I think that as more Wranglers are leaving or graduating or signing one-way deals, so graduating to the NHL or other clubs, they still need to ice an AHL team. So Sam Morton, I think, is a great player for the Wranglers. I think that, he's about to be 26 years old, and he's a solid performer. He's consistent. You know what you're going to get from him night in and night out. I think that in terms of the depth chart, there are a few players ahead of him, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have to earn. We know that your spot with the Flames is never just given. It is earned. And there are players who have been around a little bit longer, obviously, that have worked for it. And Sam Morton is a good player. But obviously, with them re-signing Dryden Hunt earlier this summer, we know that he's likely going to be their go-to guy, their next man up, because he is a versatile player. You can kind of plug and play him wherever you need him, and he's efficient. Not efficient enough, in my opinion, to take a job from one of the younger players trying to break in on the roster. And maybe I have a different vision, but I do think that Hunt and Rory Kearns are ahead of him on the depth chart. And like I mentioned, nothing wrong with that. I think that, the Wranglers are a good team. The Flames don't have the best prospect pool, but they have a solid group of guys down there. And I would expect them to make the playoffs this year. Last year they had a decent season. This year they're going to be Trent Cull got the call up to go to the Flames. So Brent Sutter is going to be coaching the Wranglers, which I find so fascinating. I want to know what he'll bring to the Wranglers organization. And I think that, change is good, especially when you get to bring on a former player who recently retired, but is still familiar with a chunk of the players in the system. We know that the Sutters hang around the organization still, so it's a fair deal. But in terms of Sam Morton, I like this. I get why it's a 1-year thing. I don't think that the Flames really are banking on him being a consistent NHL player, but he's a good hockey player. He came up through the college hockey system and won a championship. So I'm not opposed to them signing him. It makes sense. They need forwards down there. And I'm hoping that, with some increased responsibility, maybe, some more ice time, we see something new from him. And maybe he finds a spot on an NHL roster. But I feel like at this age, he is very likely just going to remain an AHLer, a fringe player. There's nothing wrong with that. It is still professional hockey. I think the Flames have a lot of players like that, but at the end of the day, they are replenishing the prospect pool. Craig Conroy is doing a great job with that. And I think that Sam Morton was a good college free agent signing. I think that I like him. I think that, like I mentioned, the depth, the consistency, he's a good skater, he's big. There's a lot of pros there. And coming up next, we are going to talk about Cullen Potter being named to the Summer Showcase with Team USA. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app, and it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are building wealth. I am someone who is very guilty of ordering lunch at work, even if I've brought my own lunch. And physically seeing that in the Monarch Money app has made a world of difference in how my spending habits have changed. If I pack a lunch, I eat that lunch. We're done ordering takeout unless it's a special occasion. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you are following me on Twitter at Just Belmosto, and you can also find my work over at the Win Column. Do a lot of written work over there. I'm doing a fun armchair GM series right now that I have a lot of fun with. It's fun to see how outrageous people are, and if there are any real attractive deals. And I have a new one coming out on Friday, so keep your eyes peeled. But first, Cullen Potter. What a name. I think that is the coolest name. And maybe that's because I'm like a cusp millennial, and, the Twilight and Harry Potter thing, ruled my childhood and adolescence. But Cullen Potter, who was the 32nd pick overall in the 2025 draft, is heading to Team USA Summer Showcase. He is a product of the U.S. Hockey Development Program, and he has proven himself. I think it's really special, and we hear the players talk about it all the time, to represent your team, to represent your country, and to wear your country's name with your name on the back, and you play for the name on the front. And there have been a lot of good players that have come up through the same system. There's a lot of road ahead of him, And I think it's super exciting. So he scored 17 goals and 46 points in 54 games. And he led Worlds with 4 assists and 4 goals in 7 games. So, did only go on to win bronze, but you know what? At least you medaled. I think that that's still pretty impressive. I know that, it's kind of like a gold or bust mentality, but I think the more experience you have, the better. And we talk about this all the time, especially with players. Like, I think of Matt Coronato specifically, and this is another U.S. development program kid who went from Harvard, so college hockey, to the Wranglers, to the Flames, but needed more time with the Wranglers. And there's nothing wrong with that, because he was going from such a contained schedule and a different workload, a different work-life balance, lifestyle change entirely. So you can't just immediately see success at the NHL level 9 times out of 10. It's very unrealistic. But what you do get is a player who is putting in the work and seeing consistent minutes. So when he was sent down from the Flames early last season for a few games with the Wranglers, he was playing those top line minutes, and playing 18 to 20 minutes a night is sometimes what you need. So getting consistent reps in, the more consistency, the better. And I think for a player that is that young, who started his college career at 17, at Arizona State, is, that it's impressive, but it's also a tall task, because you are now dealing with all sorts of pressures. So you're obviously looking to represent your country. You're playing with other, the best of the best, 18, 19-year-olds. I know James Hagan is going, and there are a few other names I recognized, but you're fighting for a spot, and you have to, it's a little tournament that they're doing. So I think it'll be fun. US and Canada face off in the final game. So, that it doesn't matter if it's just a fun scrimmage, or if it's a showcase, or the Olympics, or Four Nations. It's a big deal if you're representing your country and you are, for either one of those teams to take home, like, bragging rights, essentially. But back to Cullen Potter. I think that all signs kind of point towards him going back to college. Obviously, unless he signs his entry-level contract, then he is, obviously, his NCAA eligibility is over, and then he has to play in the AHL. I think that it's possible that we see another year of him at college, but in truth, I think that the Flames would rather have him come up to the AHL. I think that, especially being a first-round draft pick, they probably want to move him along. And I'm curious if they follow the same kind of trajectory of Coronato. So he was drafted, he went back to Harvard for a year, and then signed his entry-level contract once that season ended. So is that something that we potentially see with Cullen Potter? I just had to fact check myself. And yes, Coronato signed with his ELC after his sophomore season at Harvard. Could we see something similar? Probably. I think that that's fine. I'm not in any rush to speed these kids along. Mainly because we know the Flames aren't, like, they don't have any roster spots for these kids. Unless it's with the Wranglers, but even then, it's a little tight up there. The Flames aren't moving their forwards to move forward. Did you get that? I thought that was funny. To move forward in their rebuild. They aren't moving players, let's just say, like a Blake Coleman or Martin Pospisil, to allow two younger, potentially more skilled players come in and develop at the NHL level. And that's not their fault. I think ultimately it comes down to roster construction for the Flames and the people calling the shots. But ultimately, if Cullen Potter goes back to college for a year, it's not the end of the world. We see this a lot with college hockey kids. You know, Johnny Gaudreau did it. He played one last season with his brother and then signed. But you saw the same thing with Coronato too. He was drafted after his freshman year and signed his ELC the following spring after that season was over. So, should Potter go back for another year and then sign his ELC? Because quite frankly, I think he's fine either way. I think that, if he's getting big minutes in Arizona, keep him there. Because if he's not going to get it with the Wranglers, like I said, the more consistency with the reps, the better. And he's obviously training with the best of the best with U.S. hockey. So I'm not concerned there. I guess my biggest concern is the quality of play within that division of college hockey. And it's not because it's Arizona. It's anything. I'm super unfamiliar really with anything outside of Hockey East and the big NCAA schools. So that's my ignorance. But I don't think that he won't sign an ELC with the Flames. I think that he's put in a lot of hard work to get here. And he'd be foolish not to. Coming up next on Locked On Flames, we're going to talk about what should be on our radar because we only have one RFA that remains unsigned, and the clock is certainly ticking. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. And this is the last week of shows every single day. We move down. I go to 3 shows a week starting next week. And before we know it, we'll be back in full in-season mode where we're back to 5 days a week. But for now, here's what we need to keep on our radar as we move through the off season. Connor Zary, he is a restricted free agent that was not arbitration eligible. And he remains unsigned. So what's the holdup? I know that cap space isn't an issue, and we talked about this before, about maybe throwing a little extra money his way to incentivize him. If you have to compromise on term, okay, well, what if I give you an extra $500,000 to $750,000? Okay, well, if you're willing to meet me halfway there, we can do that sort of situation. I think that, again, his injuries play a massive part in this from the Flames. And he was still productive last year, do not get me wrong, but I think it was heavily impacted by the injuries later on in the season. And I was worried about his regression. And I had said it last offseason that it's likely for him to regress, but I thought Martin Pospisil's regression would be a lot more significant. And that was right. So I guess that's another thing you can look out for too, is Martin Pospisil's bounce back. I mean, he is trotting all around Europe right now, enjoying his off season as he should. And he's been training with Sam Honzik, who also needs to put in a lot of work this summer to prove himself, because I think a lot of people have written him off, and there's a small sample size there, but that's a whole nother story. I think that, how long this takes is a reflection on both camps and kind of like at the end of the day, we know he's going to sign. I do not see a world where he requests a trade. People have been saying like, oh, he's unhappy. I don't think that's true, just based on what I've heard. But I think there has to be a way for them to bridge this, like literally a bridge deal. Just 2 years, I think 3 years max. He has to stay healthy. He has to prove that he's a top 6 winger. I would not be surprised if they put him on the top line with Huberdeau and Kadri. I think that's a good idea, but I also think it's a great idea to try him down the middle, but that ultimately puts him on the 4th line, unless what you do is you put Zary at the 2nd line center, you bump Frost to 3rd, and Backlund, you limit his minutes in the 4th line. I think that's realistic. But at the end of the day, we know Ryan Huska makes the lineup decisions. I guess I understand being patient, especially where, they probably want to see where he's at too in terms of his injury rehabilitation, because the only news that we got was nothing's broken and he didn't need surgery, which was huge because I've really, really, really felt in my heart that it was going to be a torn ACL or an MCL that the second time around, just because re-injuring your knee in unfortunate situations within 8 weeks of each other typically leads to more structural damage. But he lucked out there. So hopefully, we're able to rest with our heads on the pillow, sleep tight with an extension in place in the next few weeks. I would hope so. Then the other thing keeping us up at night is Rasmus Andersson. The Flames are not in any sort of rush to get this done. They're being patient. They don't necessarily want to bring this into the season for the risk of injury. But if they have to be patient, they have to be patient. And I mentioned it the other day, but this is reminding me, there are stark parallels, obviously, to the Noah Hanifin trade, but to the Chris Tanev trade. You were hoping someone was going to give you that 1st-round pick, and you were holding out, hoping someone would get desperate enough to give you a 1st-round pick. But then, you didn't get that. I always forget that the Chris Tanev trade was technically a 3-team trade because it was the Stars and the Devils. So the Flames got Grishnikov and the Stars' 2nd-round pick from 2024. And then New Jersey received Dallas's 4th-round pick next year. So ultimately, if the Stars are giving up a prospect, that you can kind of, I don't want to say write them off, but the Stars scouting department is pretty good. So if they're willing to part with someone in their system, their ceiling might be a little bit lower. But I hope that Conroy doesn't sit too long, because at the end of the day, time's going to pass and he's going to have to get desperate the same way, he kind of had to do with Dallas. So he should be smart about this. But we know learning from past mistakes or past experiences isn't necessarily something this organization does well or takes into account. But I do think that Conroy has done a very good job in terms of replenishing the prospect pool through the draft. Free agency has been fine. the years that he's been in control, I have not been sitting there with my head in my hands saying, why did you just give 7 years to a 26-year-old forward, 27-year-old forward that is just going to decline? We are not seeing Brad Treliving-esque signings. And to me, that is the most important part. Are there other aspects of roster construction that could use a little bit of tweaking? Of course. There's always room for improvement in everything with everyone. So we take what we can get. And hopefully we see a Zary extension done. We see him have a healthy season. We see the Flames trade Rasmus Andersson before the start of camp to avoid any and all distractions regarding pending UFAs. Because the end of the season media availability from Andersson reminded me a lot of Nikita Zadorov's last few weeks in Calgary before he was traded. And just, I don't want to say sour, but everyone knew it was up. And they're just kind of checked out. They're not giving you the standard PR answers. They're kind of giving you your real personality. And I mean, we've all been in a work situation or any sort of social situation where you're just answering. And it's apparent that you don't care. And if you say the wrong thing, it's not, whatever. It was only a matter of time before I didn't bite my tongue before I said that. Or maybe we all haven't been in those situations and I just lack self-control. But I think ultimately we see a Zary extension first. It feels like that's like the least complicated thing left on the platter. I would like to see some trades. I would like them to trade Miramonov. They will never trade Jake Bean. If they traded Jake Bean and signed Tyson Barrie, I would be okay. I just want Jake Bean off of this team. But we know that that's not going to happen due to nepotism. So I'm curious to see if they do anything to try to move out some forwards before camp, because you can say that, come in and take a job, but when there's no jobs to take, what are you supposed to do? We've been doing the same song and dance now for years. And that'll end today on this episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And if you are at the Stampede, have fun for me. Have some cotton candy and some lemonade and all the snacks. Stay hydrated. And make sure you have on your sunscreen. And while you're at it, make sure to tell your friends about Locked On Flames, and they can get it wherever they get their favorite podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Your Calgary Flames every day, and I will see you all tomorrow.